Welcome to this special edition of the Irish Inquiry following today's rally in Dublin, organised by Diarmuid O'Kyla, Enough is Enough, Teen Herd and teachers in school staff, where today we heard lots of people speaking about the situation as we're looking at schools returning. So you're very welcome. Today we have Frances Sweeney, who is a secondary school teacher from Offaly. We have Helena Byrne, who is a primary school teacher, and we have Bara de Rosta. Did I pronounce that right?
De Rosta, yeah.
De Rosta,
Very close,
apologies.
well done.
Primary school teacher from Tala. So you're all very welcome, and thank you so much for being here today. So I just want to set the frame here, which is an article I saw yesterday. Actually went through the countries in Europe where masks were no longer going to be necessary or have never been necessary actually in schools. And it's quite an extensive list, and I was quite surprised actually at how many. Iceland, Denmark, England, Wales and Switzerland will no longer be requiring masks in school from September. Norway and Sweden never had masks and they won't be bringing them in at all. In the Netherlands, primary school students haven't been wearing them, and now neither will teachers have to wear them. And Austria, students can take their masks off once they're seated, and several other countries have decided that they'll review it after about 6 weeks. So given how many countries actually within a stone's throw from us are reviewing their mask policies and actually removing them in the most part, it's quite shocking to hear today that ISAG are actually calling now for primary schools to actually mask up their students as well. So it's quite horrific to hear that. So Bara, we'll start with you. Just tell us a little bit about your experience over the last year, and what would you like people to understand what's kind of happened?
Well, as you said, I'm a primary school teacher, so a lot of the regulations and measures that I'm concerned about haven't been put in place yet in primary schools. I specifically referring to the mask mandate in secondary schools, so children having to wear masks in school, which I fear is going to happen in primary schools, and I'm gravely concerned about that. I'm gravely concerned on health grounds. Okay? The damage that it's going to do to not only my health, but particularly to the children. You go looking for any sort of articles or studies or journals or reports, there's very little on benefits of wearing masks. In fact, most of them say there's little to no benefit of wearing a mask in terms of stopping the spread of a virus. But you print them off, you'll get a pile that high full of reports and studies done on the detrimental effects of wearing a mask. And people just don't seem to be grasping that idea, and it's very concerning. They are bad for your health. I could just mention a couple of reports there. I was reading one from a lady, what's her name now again? Dr. Brisson, I think her name was. You might have come across her. She's a leading European consultant neurologist and neurophysiologist. And she was talking about how mask wearing will, deprive oxygen levels and enhance the amount of CO2 going into the body. But she made specific reference to children, saying that oxygen deprivation will damage brain cells, and or kill brain cells. Once they're killed, they don't come back.
Okay? Yeah, it's permanent damage.
Yeah, it's permanent damage. She also said that children have more active brains. So the more active the brain is, the more oxygen it's going to require. So she has...
Which would kind of be common
yeah,
sense.
I don't think you need to be a scientist to work that out either, in fairness. But yeah, she's she'd be gravely concerned about that effect it's going to have on children's brains. I believe last year in Belgium, around September last year, 70 doctors got together and wrote to the Flemish Minister for Education, again stating their grave concern about mandatory mask wearing and how it damages or affects their development both socially and psychologically. So it's beyond me why, when the proof is there, it does very little to prevent the spread of COVID-19, but yet the proof is out there for the detrimental damage it does. And that's why I have great fear now that's going to come into our schools, in primary schools. I believe it will, because a year ago, when vaccine passports were mentioned, everyone rubbished it. It never happened. Even government TDs were saying, oh, don't worry about that, it won't happen. Of course, it's happened now.
I do know, though, that last year there was talk of primary school children being masked, in school. And there was a fair bit of pushback, actually, at the time from parents. And I know that pushback, actually, through HICWA, they actually then looked at the evidence and they said, no, there's no need for children in primary school, to wear masks. And from what I understand, it was because parents actually said no. And that wasn't obviously publicised.
Yeah, but that's a year ago, and a year is a long time. Yeah. The scaremongering has been upped. So the fear has increased. We see it every day coming across in mainstream media and our news. So it'd be interesting to see how many parents would still go along with that. I believe there's many, many parents, and I still think the majority of parents don't want to see their primary school children masked up. But who can say? So, but yeah, the year is a long time, I feel. So that would be one of my grave concerns anyway. And then the next big one then will be discrimination of children. And we've already seen what's signed into legislation in terms of pubs and restaurants. It's discrimination. You can hang bells off it, and flowers off it. Discrimination is discrimination. Treating a section of society in a different way. And that's going to come into our schools, I believe. You only have to look at mainstream media and how they work. They're the mouthpieces of the government. They put an article in the newspapers. They say, oh, this might be happening. They suggest something. Once it's suggested, you know it's going to happen. And I'm referring specifically...
There's actually a term, it's called nudging.
There you go.
Nudging is where and it is a psychological tool that has been used for many, many years to
Indeed.
to guide the thoughts, of a society.
And I'm specifically referring to the one, I think it might have been in I won't mention the newspaper, the rag, but it's to do with vaccinated children. And I know I'm in primary school and the children haven't been vaccinated yet, but again, I do believe that's going to happen.
Well, again, ISAG, I believe, we're calling for
it already, exactly. So there's more of your nudging. But we're then going to have to treat children differently based on their vaccine status. So little Johnny there has been vaccinated. He's displaying symptoms or has a few sniffles. He can stay in school. Whereas little Mary, she's been sent home because her family have chosen not to vaccinate their child, which is their right. And it's the right to bodily integrity and the right to choose. Well, apparently, that's your right. So as a teacher, I will not be able to stand by that. I will not be able to stand by that. Because we can hide behind the regulations and the rules, so to speak. But at the end of the day, each individual school becomes the enforcer. We're enforcing it.
And I think one of the things that certainly came out from the speeches today was the fact that actually most of these so-called rules are just guidelines.
Yeah.
Sorry, Barry, I'll come back to
Absolutely,
you, because I think the vaccine question is obviously a huge one. The first concern at the moment with primary schools is, will masks be brought in? But also actually teachers still being forced to wear masks, by, again, the principal and the board of management. Helena, what's your experience been around this?
Yes, I have been forced to wear a mask since April, and it's against my choice. I don't consent to it, but I have to wear a face visor. I had to get the wording in the policy changed from face mask to face covering, so that would cover the wearing of a visor. I feel very strongly also about children, of course, and the prospect of that happening in primary school. I deplore the fact that secondary school children have to wear face coverings and masks, and a differentiation is just gone out the window as regards people with any kind of a difference or in their belief on this. It just seems to be one rule for all in the majority of cases. But from a teaching point of view, I feel we have lost a lot of our integrity as teachers by being forced into this position where we have no control anymore. And, I used to be happy going to work, and now it's not. I'm not so happy, because you know you're inhibited by this face covering. It definitely stops it impedes your interaction with the children, because they cannot. You know they can't see you properly. Even a visor gets fogged up, and it's uncomfortable as well. And then you have to raise your voice slightly higher because there's a barrier there. And on the other hand, then the majority of teachers would wear face masks, and that is a total blank surface. I find it hard for, to explain anything to do with phonics, to reading a story, anything that you want the children to see your face. And so many, I know our eyes are very expressive, but like there are a lot of mouth expressions that we use. And for interaction with children, you need to have your whole body as much as you're able to be interacting with them. So I find that children with special needs, with sensory issues, don't like having to be with an SNA or a teacher that is wearing a mask. They find it difficult. I know one case where a child has refused to leave the room because these black masks are very frightening, I think, for some kids. And maybe they have an issue with the colour, or just that they would prefer to see the face of the teacher.
And how was that dealt with within the school then?
Well, in that particular case, the SNA or the learning support teacher sat with the child in the classroom and just helps the child along in class until he kind of got to know her a bit better, maybe. And maybe she changed the colour of the mask, I'm not sure. But just to kind of be with the child for a few weeks in the classroom situation. And then eventually he agreed to go to the other room.
And did the parents get involved with this situation? Was there any communication then between the parents and the school?
There probably was, yes, but I prefer not to talk about individual cases now. It's just...
No, just in terms of how these things are then addressed, because obviously that would be probably quite a common problem amongst students who do have special needs. So this idea that they can go and talk to an adult without being able to see their whole face and pick up those cues, those visual cues.
Some children.
I find it personally quite difficult talking to someone in mask. So
yes,
I think just to think of a child.
The children are very young, and a lot of them aren't able to verbalise how they feel.
Yeah.
That's some kids have language issues as well as sensory issues. So, I felt sorry for the child that I don't know if he could communicate. I was trying to interpret what was wrong. Even though that was my top of my list was the fact that he might have been afraid of the mask and just not happy with it. Yeah.
And in terms of sorry, Frances, I'll come to you in a minute because I know your secondary schools, but just from in terms of primary schools, were you given any health and safety information around masks for yourselves? Because obviously children were not wearing them, but in terms of for yourselves as the teaching staff and SNAs and any other staff actually in the school, was there any communication around the health and safety aspects of masks given to you?
Do you mean in terms of the risks that they pose to us?
Yeah,
Absolutely not, no. So, no, I remember we did get a bit of information on how to wear a mask properly, what to do, what not to do with a mask, etc. But absolutely nothing, no risk assessment or any associated documents regarding the the detrimental effect it will have. As I said, all those studies are out there. If I can find them, I'm sure boards of management can find them. So no, we were told nothing about that.
This was just a blanket rule.
Like I said, the regulations came from the department. The school enforcement goes along with them, and they question nothing, and that's what's quite despairing, really. The lack of questioning of anything. Particularly as a teacher. I try and get the children I teach to question things. And how are children going to learn to question things if the people teaching them or leading their school are not questioning things? That's a bit scary.
And did you have the same experience as well, that there was no communication around?
Yes, no, nothing, only the bare, what the Department of Education put out about them. But as regards questioning, you were saying there, Clive, like they questioned my exemption but my doctor had given me they questioned that, and the board referred me to Medmark. So that is the way they're questioning our teachers and other staff.
Only those who are resisting this or who are looking
yes,
to...
yeah. And Medmark then discounted my doctor's opinion. So one doctor, an occupational doctor would say in Medmark, overruled my doctor's exemption for me to wear a face covering.
And from what I heard today, Medmark is actually a privately owned
it is, yeah.
company.
With close connections to
very close
the Green
connections.
Party and their
Aim and I.
leader, yeah.
You know, so again, there's not that separation,
No.
you know, between what's going on. So Francis, what was your experience in terms of from a secondary school perspective?
Well, going back, as I said, to school, it happened in March, where we went into lockdown. That was what, March 20, and we were homeschooling and went back then in September, and it was like we had meetings, online meetings and everything like that, to brief us on what was going to happen when we come back and about mask wearing, etc. So there was a few of us teachers, maybe 4 or 5, that would have had, say, respiratory concerns in relation to our health, and we thought we could go in and wear our visors, but we weren't allowed from day one to wear a visor at all, the see-through, and we were compelled to wear masks. So that was very intimidating and very uncomfortable for us. Also, well, personally for me and my students, I was working with autistic students and with my mainstream students as well, and I was horrified to see that in the autism unit, that they were compelled to wear masks as well.
So no exceptions were being allowed,
as far as
again,
I could see.
across the board,
yes,
teachers or students?
Absolutely, no. And as the school day would, during a class you take, and you'd see the students and they would be fidgeting, they would become drowsy, and you could see some of them, would get very agitated, and that leads to, behaviour problems and wanting to go to the bathroom constantly just to get out. Mass breaks then were, requested, so we used to do that initially, and then they disappeared. I just heard somebody talking again about confirming that again today.
So they were forced to wear it from the minute they came in to when they left, apart from...
Yeah, and non-verbal communication disappeared. And to see a smile, a student smile, to see a teacher smile, to see a colleague smile at you, was just, you felt the support and the camaraderie just disappeared. Having to take breaks in your car because there wasn't anywhere to go, to have a cup of coffee. So we didn't meet. You didn't meet your colleagues, and that was very, 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 very tough.
And what impact did you see? Obviously, in terms of physically, they were drowsy, they were, kind of agitated and anxious and everything else. And academically, what did you then see happen with your students? Did you see an impact?
Yes, the concentration, their interest was halved literally in the classroom. So you were there, what do I do to try and stimulate them? But no matter what techniques, you introduced, I'd always, provide a variety of activities in a class, but still they just hadn't that. It was like they just gave up over a number of months.
You can imagine that in the primary context, where those children have even less attention span, if they're younger, it's going to be even worse again.
Unbelievable, yeah.
And was this expressed by, so you said there were a few teachers in your school who had respiratory situations, so that was, a concern, so that was part of why they didn't want to wear it. And how did that group then cope as the year went on? Like, was there
they just put up with it.
And was there communication with the school, with the board of management around this? Was there any sort of pushback from the staff?
Not that I know of, no. Just people, it was easier just to put up with it and go on. And this was the whole concept that's still going on a year and a half later is, sure, this is going to be over soon. Just stick with it for another few months, and we'll be fine. We'll be out of this in no time. And this seems to be
and we are fast approaching, the next
frame of
years
thought
starting, and
Absolutely.
to see this is still being proposed, to stay in place.
Yeah.
And again, did you have any health and safety communication around, not only for staff but for students? Was there anything around?
No,
around
the
this?
only thing we were engaged in was the COVID policy, like, the health and safety policy, the this policy, that policy, whatever in the school. And that was reviewed, say, every week on a weekly basis to see how this one-way system would go, or the way they were organising the canteen would go, or what was happening in classrooms, with regard to social distancing, etc. But in relation to, having consideration or being made aware of any health risks posed to wearing masks. Another thing is the hand sanitizer, toxic, and they actually take some off the
withdrew it
market.
because,
Yeah,
again,
in
they
the
hadn't
end.
done their due diligence.
Yeah.
They hadn't actually
Like
looked
the
at it.
fumes from that in a room, and you had to sanitize all the desks between each class as well.
Yeah, these things are
Yeah,
toxic.
yeah,
They are,
yeah.
and that's the whole point, is they kill things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Plus, your natural.
Yeah, and I
flora on
did
your
hear that
skin.
children actually were suffering respiratory issues from the hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
So
Children get most of their immunity, and I get most of my immunity from being a teacher. Most teachers will tell you go back in September. You get your sniffles by near the end of September into October. You're catching something, a cold or something, because you're back again in amongst all the germs. And that's fine. That's part of the job, and that's helped my immune system, and that's how children's immune systems build up as well. So all this sanitizing is just, it's a mask wearing then in second. It's just further killing the immune system. It's nonsensical.
So, what would you like to see happen yourselves as teachers? Where do you think the help needs to come from in terms of raising awareness around this or changing this? What do you see? What would you like to see?
I'd like to see teachers given the choice to wear a mask or not, because most of them now are vaccinated, and that is what our unions wanted as well. They wanted the opportunity for all staff to be vaccinated if they wanted to, and they would probably prefer that if there were no unvaccinated staff as well. But I would just like to see that school staff have choice, whether they're vaccinated or not, to wear a mask or not, so that they can do their job to the best of their ability. If they have a certain fear around picking up COVID, by all means, they can wear a face covering. If not, I think they should have the choice to make that decision for themselves. I mean, we are adults, and we have always looked after our health, and we've always watched what risks we are taking. So, I would say the same for the secondary school students as well. I mean, leave it up to them. Some of them will want to wear the mask maybe for some reasons, and others will not. And I just think it has to come back to personal responsibility.
It's hard to believe in this day and age we're screaming for choice. It was trending only a couple of years ago, my body, my choice, and that's just gone.
It's kind of pick and choose, isn't it?
Yeah, pick and choose when it applies. So choice, I'd back up what Anina says, so important. Because I'm not going to judge anyone who comes in and wears a mask. That's their business. And that's what I want to see. I'd like to see teachers come together. I mentioned about discrimination. I want to see teachers coming together regardless of their vaccine status. I want to see teachers stand up and do not stand idly by and watch children in their class or under their care being discriminated against. I mentioned about some children will be sent home, others will be allowed to stay. I don't see how any teacher can justify that.
And obviously it's quite a sneaky way of not asking directly whether someone has been vaccinated or not, is to say, well, you can stay if you have, and you have to go home if you haven't.
Yeah.
So immediately, although it might not be...
and they're taking advantage of people's better nature, because a lot of people, probably parents, will be honest because they're afraid to not to be honest. But it's quite ironic because there's been no honesty in this all along,
So, Francis, what would you like to see happen in terms of around masks, first of all, and then we'll talk about vaccines afterwards?
Well, around masks, I'd like to see them disappear, absolutely. Also, I agree with Bara in relation to that, students and teachers should be given a choice in relation to whether they wear them or not, because Some people have a lot of fear, and we have to respect that and see that point of view as well. And the division that is looming ahead in September, I think that is dreadful, and it's something that is orchestrated in society at the moment, and we're looking at the restaurants and pubs. I also feel that more, I suppose, accountability should be demanded from the schools, board of management, etc., in relation to their duty of care to students and teachers in their school around the negative effects of masks.
There does seem to be a lot of, when parents have gone, because I know I've spoken to families who have had this issue, when they've said, look, there's an exemption, GP letters, and some students have not even been allowed into school as a result of that, is that the principal and the board of management have simply said, these are the rules and this is nothing to do with us, that we are just simply being told what to do. But that's not actually the case, is it? In the sense that this is not a legal requirement. This is just simply being set as guidelines
Absolutely.
by the Department of Education, the Department of Health. This is not the same as, say, on public transport, where it's a legal requirement to wear one, and that was passed through. And I think, do you think most teachers know that this is not a legal requirement?
The board has, it comes under health and safety at work, or I'm not sure of the exact title of that the policy comes in under, but it seems that policy has a higher standing than our own personal rights as humans to wear what we want at work, so it seems that this board, the board can interpret the government guidelines whichever way they want. So you could have a board that has particularly strong members who do not like masks being worn in school or whatever, that wish masks to be worn. So you could, and that would influence the policy then that everybody has to abide by.
It's all very individual, all right. It does come down to boards of management. I mentioned there the enforcers. Some might enforce them more strictly than others, and so that's what you're up against. That's what parents are up against. If they want to go in and speak to a principal or write to a board of management, 20 parents could go in, you get 20 different responses from 20 different schools. So I still encourage people, though, to, if they're not happy with something, to approach their board of management. From the gathering today, I noticed a lot of parents came up to us afterwards and spoke to various teachers and asked how they could go about it. They're not armed with the right tactics of how to go about it. A lot of the time, anyway, they feel that they have to write to the principal or the teacher. Sometimes, it's not. It has to go through the board of management. And I did direct them towards that. Was it We the Sovereign People series from a one.ie? Is it? I can't think of the chaps' names again. Two lads who give great advice on how to deal with schools, how to deal with your employers, and maybe that could be put up on the Irish Inquiry at some stage. We'll get the links for it somehow. But I think that gave great confidence to parents today to see that there are some teachers who are willing to stand up. Not enough at the moment, but I believe there will be more, particularly when they come probably to vaccinate primary school children. I do believe you might get a few more to speak out, hopefully.
And what about the unions? What role have they been playing in all of this?
Well, they've been on a roll of their own, because they have been very much at the forefront since the union conferences there in Easter, that they wanted all teachers vaccinated. You might remember teachers were on a certain point on the rollout of vaccines, and then they got bumped down towards an age. I
think they're initially fighting for teachers to be bumped up the list.
Yeah.
I don't think they were maybe saying want all teachers vaccinated, but they did say that teachers, whoever choose, should be bumped up the list. Because at the end of the day, I suppose we are more frontline than lots of other sections of society.
Yeah, but
Well, in saying that, in fairness, actually, there were 0 deaths from COVID of anyone under the age of 24 in this country. So that obviously is primary schools, secondary schools, and most third level. If they did have it, they were recovered fairly quickly. But certainly there were no deaths as a result of specifically of COVID for any healthy young person. So I think this kind of, a lot of teachers seem, sort of the message that we're kind of getting from the public side is very much that teachers felt like this was not a safe environment to be in. But again, looking at the data and looking at the research that was done, again, young people, very robust immune systems against this. This was a skewed age profile in terms of those who were over 75 or 70, I'm not sure the exact number, but certainly past retirement age, were much more likely, they were like 1,000-fold more likely to get sick and die from this than a child. Whereas actually, unlike flu, which can actually impact any age across the board, this was something that for young people really has not been a factor. Yeah. So, a lot of what I was hearing, as a parent as well, listening out for what was coming out of schools, was this, but it seemed to be more a drive from the union. So, if I'm wrong about this, please do correct me.
Well, I interpreted it as scaremongering. That's really what it was. Oh, you're being pushed out, and teachers were just clamouring. Why are we? And we really, really need, to get these vaccines soon because we believe through the media, through propaganda, that we are at a huge risk in school.
It was mentioned today, I think, at the talk as well about a sponsorship. It might have been yourself, Elena, mentioned it. Pfizer sponsoring, I think it was Vaccination Week. Now, when I say Vaccination Week, it wasn't around COVID, it was just vaccination in general, I suppose, because children get vaccinated in primary school for other things. But it's sponsored by Pfizer, but yet the INTO magazine put that into allowed that to go into their magazine. I mean, what are they thinking? Allow, a company, a global corporation who essentially won't make any money if you're healthy, who wants you sick. How are they letting that into their magazine, a teacher's magazine? And obviously people are going to see this, teachers are going to see this, it's probably going to go in subconsciously, oh look, there's Pfizer sponsored Vaccination Week. So
I looked at some of that material. I know it was sent to me by a nurse, an ex-nurse friend, and because of my teaching background, and I looked at it. There was actually games for the children to play. Beautiful colour with the COVID personality, and
like this
chasing with the jab.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was who can get it first, like thing. And I'm like, I don't believe this. I just don't believe this.
How do you think?
I'm in a dream. I'm going to wake up soon.
Well, can I just say very quick, just on the unions as well, they really, really do need now to represent all teachers. I remember emailing them some time back, the INTO, and asking, look, it was around the time that they were saying, look, we want teachers to be bumped up the list for vaccinations, and that's fine if a teacher chooses. But that concerned me. I did get in touch and say, look, well done, you're representing your members, but I hope you will also represent teachers who choose not to be vaccinated. So I emailed them again. It was probably a week or two went by, no reply. I emailed them again, no reply again. I think it was 5 weeks when I got a reply. My email then was a little less polite, let's say, and they emailed me straight back. But they did mention that nobody's going to be under pressure to get it. Apparently it was offered to, I think, some of the special schools. Was that right? Some teachers in special schools were offered it, and apparently there was quite a number who did actually decline it. But as I said, that's several months ago now, so things just have been changing so quickly recently.
And that's one of the questions is actually regarding the actual, because I don't believe that the figures we're being shown are true figures for anything, because we've just been told so many lies, which have been easily disproven, actually. Yeah. In terms of actually the percentage of teachers who don't want to wear masks and who do not want to accept this injection, and one of the problems is it's been called a vaccine, but we know that it doesn't do the job of a vaccine. It is a gene therapy. It is experimental in the sense that it is still in phase 3 trials. And again, I'm wondering how much of that is actually communicated to teachers, around actually the safety of these things, the where they're at in terms of their trials, in terms of the safety data. And it's just a given that at this point, this was rolled out so quickly and developed so quickly. There is no long-term data currently available. Has that been actually communicated to teachers around this, or has it just simply been, this is the rollout, this is when you're going to be offered it? From that point of view.
I suppose it comes down to whole informed consent again, isn't it? People, so it doesn't just apply to teachers or nurses, or it's everybody. People aren't being informed when they go in there and say, well, look, this is a risk that can happen. They might mention, you might get a headache, you might get migraine, but they're not giving the statistics out there that are available, on VARS or on the, what's the one in England, the yellow
Yellow
card
Yellow
system.
card.
I mean, it's out there for everybody. So no, there's
no
it does bring up
communication
the whole
around
thing
that.
of informed consent again. It's
And what about sort of the split amongst teachers then, in terms of who's, just obviously you can't, it's not you're naming names, but in terms of a percentage, what would you say? I mean, obviously it's difficult because you're not probably communicating so much with each other.
Well, this is it. You see, you don't know what your colleagues think because you are not communicating, you're not socialising outside of school or inside of school. So, that is a misnomer. We don't know what.
I mean, there could
What
be
the situation
two teaching staff maybe and one SNA in a school of 60 at second level that would not take the vaccine, we'll say. And again, in a smaller school, it could be just 1 out of 10. So it's kind of that ratio, I suppose, really nearly 1 in 10, if you think of it that way.
That wouldn't take
Wouldn't take a vaccine. That we know of, that I would know of, because again, as you say, we don't
You
talk
don't
about
really
it.
know. Yeah.
And can I just mention about that company that we mentioned there earlier, with their product, the Pfizer materials. Like they admitted that they got the package together. They started creating the materials in March, and they had it ready for the classroom in May, I think it was. So that's an extraordinarily quick period of time for materials to be developed, for teachers for lesson plans, for trialling lessons in a classroom situation, which always happens, I'm sure, with curriculums and with new textbooks and everything. So that was a very short space of time, and I felt it mirrored the kind of short space of time that the vaccine has been created in as well.
And I think just a lot of people just still are not fully aware of how long a vaccine normally takes to develop, and more importantly, the safety studies and how safety studies and trials are actually carried out, and the length of time. Because it's not just about, you see a lot of people coming out from their vaccine saying, I was fine, it was great, it was all very professional, and I'm sure it is. However, we are listening to a lot of professionals around the world who are very concerned about the medium and long-term impact of this. If you haven't had an acute reaction to it, what will happen later on, down the line. And this is under emergency use authorization only. So this idea of segregating a society based on something that is not fully licensed, is not fully trialed, we don't know the long-term data.
And when
I
people
just
who
feel like
have been vaccinated can still catch and spread it as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it
and
makes
then-
that whole segregation, discrimination even more of a thing.
And people who've had COVID and have recovered.
Yeah.
So have natural immunity. That's not been taken into account. As far as I'm aware, there was something like 70,000 children actually tested positive from when the first, the tests started to roll out in terms of, the asymptomatic tests, the PCR.
Which again is just pure and utter nonsense.
But if they're not nonsense, and if we can't have it both ways, can we? If you've got 70,000 people children who tested positive, then those immediately should be regarded as fully immune, to this.
But is your status in relation to whether you had COVID or not is not checked when you go for a vaccination either?
From what I understand.
Yeah.
No, that's not.
Antibody tests, they won't do them either, antibody tests. They don't want to know if you're immune or protected from it,
And-
It's just get the jab, that's all. That's the main focus, unfortunately. You were saying there about the percentage of people in schools. I heard a good one recently. It was, how do you know somebody has got the COVID vax? They'll tell you. And that's exactly... That's exactly how it would be in the school I'm in. I know who has been vaccinated, and up to the certain age categories. But when we broke up for the summer, a certain age category hadn't been reached yet, but they had already expressed their intention to get it. Again, that's their choice. That's absolutely fine. I have no problem with choice, but I want to be treated the exact same as them. Me or anyone else who chooses not to get vaccinated. And that's the big thing for me.
And there is a big issue around GDPR. You know, this is private medical information.
Yeah.
I know I personally have been asked by staff in Tesco's, you know, have I had my vaccine? And I actually did, you know, I did write a complaint, so I'm happy to say the name of the supermarket.
Right.
But I just feel like there has been this huge nudging, not just nudging, but really kind of shoving actually, of this is okay to discuss private medical information publicly. Whether it's in a supermarket, whether it's, you know, and now obviously going into cafes and bars and restaurants, you know, this idea that, well, you know, if everyone's sitting inside, you know they're all vaccinated.
Yes, absolutely.
So straight away, and this thing of, you know, kids can go home, will have to be sent home if they're not vaccinated and can stay if they are.
Yeah.
You know, so even though they know they can't directly do it,
But do you think
obviously
the
it's
effect
very
that that's
obvious.
going to have on the children themselves, knowing, oh, why am I being sent home? And then all the other children will see, oh, look, that's one of the non-vax children. I mean, the shame or the embarrassment that that's going to bring on certain children or on a family. I mean, you can assume if that child hasn't got the jab, that their family probably haven't as well. But maybe not. There's plenty of people who vaccinated who probably won't vaccinate their children. That's, again, their choice and it's fine. But you're really putting children in the spotlight there. And again, it comes down to each individual school. They're going to be enforcing that. You know, they will be enforcing. They will be singling that child out by allowing this to happen. I think we just need principals and boards to stand up and just say, look, just because it's in the regulation doesn't mean we're going to go along with it. As you say, the regulations, it hasn't been mandated. You know, that's the big thing for me. We need brave people to stand up, and I haven't seen it yet.
And
very, very few.
That's definitely seems to be what's coming to the fore at the moment. Is you know for people to start to really think about the long-term impact of not having this courage to speak up and speak out.
And it's just something I'm concerned about the way we use language around all this, and even the word vaccine. We know that it's not a vaccine. Lots of doctors would say that it's a gene therapy, and it definitely doesn't behave. It doesn't behave as a vaccine. You know, it's not an antibody it's not a part of the virus that's put in your body for your body to react against. So it doesn't behave that way. And things like that Pfizer material being created to make it look like it was a vaccine, a normal vaccine way of working. And the other thing that I don't know if you've come across it in second level, but the Leave Insert biology this year had a question on vaccines, and it was phrased it begun with COVID-19, whatever, has been a big story in our country, and blah, blah, and it went on then to vaccine questions. Again, just subtly making the link between COVID and a vaccine.
And I suppose the other side of this is what has been encouraged, particularly in secondary schools, you know, around their own taking responsibility for their own personal health, you know, in terms of for students. What have you seen anything being given to students to help them in terms of their physical health, their mental health around this?
Well, as I said, in my experience, as I said, the conversion to healthy eating, this wellness program has been brought in, you know, over, and it's also in the primary schools over, well, I suppose it's the last maybe 6-7 years.
Yeah.
Food.
And
That's longer then.
so it's a big, you know, kind of a core movement, and this, and suddenly it has been just nipped in the bud, you know, in relation to not highlighting, you know, what they can do in relation to boosting their immune system. You know, reiterating that and revisiting that, and, you know, about your healthy eating, about getting your fresh air, about cutting down on screen time, you know, taking your vitamin supplements. And in the media in general, that's what I said, well, any day now, like say RTE or whatever, going to put in these little slots as well to balance the information coming out. You know, because it's totally one-sided. It's so one-sided, and it's, you know, there's no level playing field anymore. And so much has been hidden and suppressed. And it's like students will forget about stuff unless you know, keep reintroducing
Remind
it.
them.
Adults will forget about stuff unless it's brought up, you know, repeatedly, to know what's good for you.
You mentioned something off camera there about pupil voice. as well.
Oh yes, yes, yes.
They're not being,
Who's asking the
who's
opinions of the students? Who's interviewing them and seeing how, that's not being publicised or broadcasted anywhere.
Well, I'm I'm afraid I don't know if was it. Is it Kira Kelly who's on News Talk, and she interviewed Micheál Martin, and his response around the vaccine rollout for 12 to 15-year-olds is, well, we have to listen to the children's voice because they want the vaccine.
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, why are we not, we haven't heard their voices about anything else coming up to this.
Yes.
And how can a 12 to 15-year-old or even 16, 17-year-old, really understand the implications of this when most adults actually don't. They don't understand actually what's really...
First of all, that was a throwaway comment by him. I mean, how many children has he spoken? I doubt unless it's his own children he's referring to. But it's just getting to the level now that we do need to start listening to children properly, absolutely, 100%. But certainly in secondary schools, it's a buzzword, pupil voice. It's a big movement at the moment, the last few years. But again, it's like what we're discussing there, that the pick and choose every now and then.
My body,
my choice. It's like the pupil voice. Okay, we want to hear what the students have to say, but not on this.
But not on
Yes,
this.
yeah.
Not on
yeah.
this.
Like the student council is part of every
There you
secondary
go.
school, and it's through that, but a lot of activities like that have been,
Curtailed.
And another thing, sorry, just about that.
well, they're not
again,
as strong as vocal or as they would have been,
about children and them wanting to have it, to have the vaccine. They're saying as well, children are afraid, and maybe they are, but I mean, if children are afraid, it's because they've been made afraid. It's the scaremongering and the fear and the mask wearing everywhere and the yellow signs everywhere. So if there are children who are feared, it's because they've been made. It's not that natural fear in them. I don't believe. It's been put out there.
Well, it's an invisible enemy.
Absolutely.
They're not actually, you can't see it, and there's constant reminder, and the public health.
They're also saying,
announcements
children, get vaccinated to protect your parents. Like,
since when have children been?
grandparents, yeah.
It's like wearing a child as a bulletproof vest.
We protect our children. That's our job, not our children's job to protect us. And that nonsense has to stop.
Yeah.
I think that's a very pertinent point, in terms of what message children have had, and the impact that messaging has actually had on their mental health and on their ability to learn, and to concentrate at school and to be able to, because a brain in fear, can't learn. No. It's shut down.
I think the mixed messages that we're just kind of talking about are going to be detrimental to those children, because they're, on the one hand, in SPHE we teach them about yes feelings and no feelings. So a no feeling is something that you should act on, and you can say no if it's an unsafe touch, and you move away and you tell an adult. So we're teaching them not to tolerate any kind of danger that's personal danger, and they're seeing children of all ages, I'm sure, are seeing teachers under stress who are experiencing negativity, having to wear a mask or whatever, and they're seeing the teacher putting up with it rather than trying to get help or trying to solve this. So we're actually disabling children. I think we're teaching them that sometimes you can change things, whereas we'd like them to think that they can be they can change things. Do you know what I mean?
Teachers
that's a very
should
valid
model,
point.
Teachers are modeled.
Yeah.
We're actually
if
giving
they're
bad
modelling fear,
example
then
ourselves.
yeah.
We're giving bad example ourselves by putting up with what we're putting up with.
So we could sit here and talk all day about this. I think it's a subject that's been debated, across the world, and millions of people have opinions one way or another. In terms of moving forward, we have a very short window before schools go back, and then once schools are back in, So in terms of what can teachers do? So if teachers are in primary schools at the moment, what would you recommend that they do? We'll talk about secondary school teachers in a moment.
Okay, I think I've mentioned it before. I want to see teachers, regardless of vaccine status, come together. Forget about vaccines or whatever you want to call them. Forget about that, or who is and who isn't. Do not, under any circumstances, tolerate discrimination of any children that you teach or in your care in that school.
Or even amongst the teachers.
Or even amongst the teachers, absolutely. But I'm going to think we can defend ourselves, I suppose, as adults, but the children can't while they're in there. I think you used that term today, what was that again?
Educational...
Parentis, or what?
In loco parentis.
In loco
Loco
parentis,
parentis,
yeah,
yeah.
you know, and so it's very, very important. That's so they're in our care when we're there, so we are representing them. There's all this talk about the whole school community. You hear it mentioned all the time in school. The whole school community refers to the children, the staff, the board, the local community, local business and things like that. If we're really, you know, if we're taking that seriously, well, let's stand by families, you know, who choose not to take the jab and not distinguish between them. We're all part of the same community. We're all teachers. Come together and speak up. Just please speak up. That's what I'd call for. Be brave. Have that courage, you know, because probably might not get this chance again. And, you know, you're going to look back in years and say, I didn't speak up when I should have.
Otherwise we would be part of educational apartheid. And we don't want that on our watch, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
And what would you suggest for teachers to do?
I have been up to now trying to keep the class experience as normal as possible, you know, as it always was. So I wouldn't mention the C word or, you know, just keep it as normal as possible and keep it fun, keep smiling, and maybe try some games from behind your mask or your visor to see, can they guess your expression? Something like that, just to kind of...
Just to get that feedback.
Get them used to kind of trying to read your eyes. Because they're going to have to learn a whole new way of communicating with people just from the nose up or from the below the eyes up. So... but
get them outside.
And get them outside as much as possible, and... yeah, and keep them exercising and keep fun in the classroom as much as possible, I think.
Sing.
So that's
You
your
have to do it
sing.
outside.
Yeah, absolutely, sing.
So you're like going along with what I'm hearing is that the masks are not going away.
They're not going away for teachers or in primary or in secondary or for secondary pupils.
Okay.
But
Well, I would have a different talk.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
No,
Go
but
ahead.
I don't
Yeah.
agree with that, of course. But
Yeah.
I mean, as you outlined at the beginning, there are
But
lots
it's
of
what- it's
countries
what-
where there are
there
being
aren't-
dropped, and that's what we would like to see,
Yeah.
or
But-
are a choice being.
But how do we start being proactive around that? And I think it's making demands on the Board of Management to show us the studies,
The risk assessment that they've
the risk
undertaken,
assessment
yeah.
that they have done on these masks.
And
the
actually-
use of this hand gel.
Absolutely, and actually one of the
to-
things that was said to me today was also to look at the insurance companies and the policies. Because should something happen to a member of staff or to a pupil because of these measures, you know, what is the implication of that in terms of is the school covered?
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
it may not be, you know, and all it's going to take is for one big case to be taken, and I feel like it's, you know, but
I can imagine
we
it
don't want to
won't-
get to that
it won't
point.
be covered, and I imagine also that not many teachers have gone to their board and said, I want to see a completed risk assessment. and
So perhaps
associated documents.
that's a good place to
So
start,
it
is for teachers to actually
And to encourage parents
and
as
to
well to
encourage
do it.
parents and teachers to
100%,
to-
and that's all it is standing up and going and doing it.
Because the bottom line, as
Approaching
you
it.
said,
And saying no, I do not-
is
I do
protecting
not
the
consent.
children.
So maybe that's something that teachers and parents really need to get behind, is to write to the Board of Management and to insist on being shown the risk assessment, the risk benefit analysis, looking at the insurance, you know, around this, looking at evidence around masks, looking at evidence around even something like asymptomatic transmission, which to me is a contradiction in terms.
Well, it goes against
Anyway,
science.
it does go
it
against
doesn't
science.
happen, like they-
You know, around natural immunity and things like that, and to really put pressure on evidence, you know, because the whole scientific method has gone out the window from what I can see over the last, year and a half, that common sense, logic, science has disappeared, and instead we've got hysteria, superstition, and people just operating from a position of fear, and it's about, maybe just taking a breath, grounding
Literally.
ourselves.
And even just acknowledging that there are people in the staff and pupils who have had COVID, and that they're not catered for in the risk assessment.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but do you remember hearing, when you were younger or even, not so young, that once you caught a cold, you could never catch it again. You can't catch the same cold twice.
Absolutely, yeah.
But that seems to have, again, sort of disappeared. So I think we need to sort of take a much broader view of this. Really stop, look for the logic, look for the rationale, and look for the evidence behind these decisions. Because if there is none, then really this is just
Yeah, we
cruelty.
need to start questioning things more, putting questions to our boards of management, which we probably haven't really been doing up to now. But I think now's the time because it's another school year starting now.
And
it's
Francis,
gone
as
on
you were
too
saying, I think a lot of the attitude was it's only for a few months, it's only for we'll just get through this, we'll get through this. And a lot of people just want to get back to normal. And I don't know about you guys, but I think normal's gone.
Absolutely.
It's about going to what we want to create, going forward. And the time is now, because if we don't speak up now, then when? So I'd like to thank you guys so much for your bravery in speaking up, for your courage, over the last year and a half. I'm sure you've had all kinds of situations to overcome yourselves, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thanks, girls.